Welcome to Conveyancing Matters with Lorraine and Stu. Join us for a chat about all things property.
Hello, Stu. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Lorraine. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, lovely. So, technical as ever. I have my phone here. It's switched on. I'm just, I'm living my best IT life here, Stu. Because really, at your suggestion, what we thought we'd talk about today is sort of managing clients' expectations in relation to conveyancing in what is the most extraordinary market at the moment. I noticed on Twitter today, Estate Agency Today have reported, and the headline is, Agents back Rightmove allegation of log jams in conveyancing. So the agents are saying, yes, there's log jams in conveyancing. Now, to be fair, the article isn't as negative as it sounds to conveyancers, because to be fair, the people in the article do talk quite clearly about, delays with searches, mortgages, etc. So they're not sort of blaming conveyancers, but certainly, Stu, that sort of conveyancer blame thing is certainly something that you and I experience a fair bit. And I know, to be fair to you, bless your heart, you've been subject to it a bit in the last week or so. So that's why we thought we'd have a talk about it.
Yeah, it's a real important topic for me because, our practice has been built over the years on, giving good service, and giving good service, being diligent and doing a good job is obviously paramount to any property lawyer. And, I always say that, property lawyers in general are much of a muchness. Most of us are the same. There's not one that's fantastically better than another one. You put everybody in a room, they do roughly the same kind of job.
Oh, I don't know. Apart from you and me, Stu.
Well, yeah, we're a bit better than the rest, but apart from us, of course, right? Okay.
And therein we have some comments on Twitter already.
Well, I just assumed that was obvious, but apart from us, we roughly do the same kind of job. We have to follow a certain protocol in terms of the way that the conveyancing transaction works. And herein lies some of the problems us lawyers then face. So in this current market, there really needs to be some kind of voice, I feel, for the property lawyers, because it seems totally acceptable at the minute for the banks to have enormous delays in producing mortgage offers. It seems to be totally acceptable that us lawyers have to jump on the phone when we submit a report to the bank. We have to wait an hour on the phone at least, if we're not cut off, to check they received it. When we exchange contracts, we commit a client to a moving date. We must ensure that the mortgage company's money's going to be here. So we're back on the phone again. It's another hour. But that's one matter. You might have 20 completions at the end of the week. That's 20 hours you're engaged on the phone.
Yeah.
It seems to be acceptable to the world that, banks have delays. We have cases whereby surveyors have backlogs of 6 to 8 weeks. We've already spoken previously on this chat regarding the land registry and the enormous backlogs that they have. Search companies have a different turnaround in terms of producing their products. We have managing agents and landlords that are slower to produce their packs. And of course, it seems acceptable that other businesses incur these delays during what, of course, is an unprecedented and very difficult climate. But us property lawyers don't seem to have that same, that same slack. And it really does seem that a lot of clients aren't mindful of what we're doing. And it's really important to convey the point that, we don't get paid until somebody's matter completes. There's no interest to us in matters taking ages to go through. I would say, despite whatever somebody down the pub tells you,
that's why we can still go to the pub, mate.
While we can, yeah. I would say that an average is historically has been, say, 12 to 14, 12 to 16 weeks potentially if it's leasehold. At the moment, I would say you need to add on a month if we want to be realistic and if we want to manage everybody's expectations.
Well, that's really interesting, because that is exactly what the guys in the Estate Agency Today article were saying about timeframes. And as I say, to be completely fair to the Estate Agency Today and the guys that were quoted, they weren't, you know, slagging off conveyancers. They were just talking about the delays generally. But of course, what they were saying, and I know we've talked about this before, but it is so central to what we do. And, you know, we don't call it managing clients' expectations for nothing. And they sort of suggested, exactly as you've said, you know, clients need to understand that it is going to take longer at the moment. But what I find sort of, and have, to be fair, Stu, for years find extraordinary, is that clients aren't prepared to be told, even at the beginning, that you know, what we think may happen. I mean, they are paying for our experience. That's part of the, you know, that's part of what we've got to give. So we're often the bearers of bad news, even before we've done anything. And what I find, and I know you've experienced this week, Stu, and I do think you ought to get it off your chest, mate, to be quite honest with you, is the fact that the way people think it's totally acceptable to speak to us. You know, I mean, the only time I've ever felt threatened in any job was when I was, you know, doing conveyancing, and I had a very, very large, you know, very, very irritated beneficiary standing between me and my door, just incredibly, incredibly threatening. And it's the only time I felt physically threatened. And I sat there and I thought, this is unacceptable. You know, I'm running an office on my own. I've got my support staff, but what was I, you know, and I know that's a bit of an extreme example, but it's sort of the way that clients think it's okay to speak to us. They would get, if they spoke to somebody like that in Tesco's or Morrison's, they would be escorted off the premises. Tesco's or Morrison's or the rail companies wouldn't take it in the way that you and I are expected to take it.
No, I mean, we have a total zero tolerance policy on any kind of abuse to any one of our staff here. Zero tolerance on any racism, which we've experienced this week, homophobic comments, and just general abuse. But, you know, the key point is we're not detracting from the fact that each client, you know, should be given a service. And despite the volume of clients that we process, you know, that transaction is very personal to that client, and you know, it's a stressful situation, we know that. But, you know, clients' expectations in terms of how often they should be hearing from us, you know, I would say that to be hearing from us, you know, once, twice a week is reasonable. If you don't hear from us, it's not because nothing's happening. You know, we are processing in the background. But, you know, we carry out legal due diligence. The reason we carry out this process is to protect clients from making a mistake. You know, we want to ensure that they buy the property, they don't then subsequently have issues with it. It would be lovely for us to say, do you know what? Who cares? Let's just exchange. You know, let's just exchange. Let's just complete. Let's all get paid, make far more money. I don't need to have anywhere near the volumes of staff that I've got. You know, it'd be far easier for us to do that. If we take a step back, we're doing this to protect clients for no other reason whatsoever. You know, we don't want it to take forever to go through, but it is in this climate going to take longer. In this climate, unfortunately, you know, it might well be that we don't get back to clients within 24 hours. And I think in terms of what you should expect from your lawyers, you know, if you don't hear from them within a day or 2 days, it may well be that stuff is still happening. It doesn't mean that the lawyer needs to put up with, you know, forms of abuse, etc. Yeah. And the irony, I was looking at a particular client that posted something on Twitter the other day, and it was completely, think of no other way of putting it other than completely slagging off somebody within our practice that was dealing with them, to an extent that that person, you know, brought them to tears. But the irony of it all was, when I looked at that particular client's Twitter, you know, only 6 months, a year ago, however long it was, they were sort of very critical of the press in the way that they treated Caroline Flack when she had her difficulties.
Oh, really? Well, that's really interesting.
And we know how that ended. So there is a line, and we've got a complaints policy here. Any clients can contact me, always trying to help. But I would honestly say, and this is not just our firm here, I would like to make a statement and put something out there that 99% of all property lawyers at the moment are probably doing double the workload that they would normally do, and they are all working to achieve the same goal, which is getting you as a client exchanged and completed as quickly as possible. But with the current climate and with COVID-19 and everything else that's going on, there are parameters in which we have to work, and there are difficulties within our industry where all the third parties that we deal with, and the other day we actually counted that it's possible you could have 19 third parties to a transaction.
Which is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, and the thing is, too, I would absolutely reiterate that, because I'm sort of connecting, with people on property lawyers in particular, at all sort of, ends of the scale across a property firm, on LinkedIn in particular. Not one of them is saying, well, I'm twiddling my thumbs. They are all working to absolute capacity. And actually, you're saying about double the amount of work, but again, a really interesting move from stat from Rightmove is Rightmove have said there's about, get this, 40% more sales in the system than a year ago. So not than 6 months ago, when we were all twiddling our thumbs and staring out the window and wondering if we've got any work to do. 40% more sales in the system right now than a year ago. And the point you made, Stu, when we were chatting about this before we press record, however much you try, conveyancing firms cannot scale up to deal with that volume that quickly. I know of huge numbers of conveyancing staff, and I worry about their mental health and everything else, who are working weekends, who are working late, and frankly doing all the things that, to be honest, they probably shouldn't be doing in terms of processing workload. But really interesting also, I also know of a firm that I do a lot of training work with. Nice, big, decent firm. They would do sort of quite a lot of sort of higher end work, multi-office firm, and they actually stopped taking on new instructions. They've got lots of property lawyers, Stu. They stopped taking instructions for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, imagine that. They turned away property work for 2 weeks just to give their property colleagues the chance to catch up. That's the kind of mark.
I think, yeah, incredible, isn't it? I think that, we are not, as lawyers, taking on extreme volumes of work because all of a sudden we've, had a big marketing campaign and everything's, flowing into us because we're all brilliant. There is a backlog because of the current climate. There's a bottleneck in terms of getting matters through because, as I said, there was 19 sort of other third parties that you could count on that might be involved in a transaction. Only takes 1 or 2 of them to have delays, which, they all have delays. And therefore it affects us. But of course, we're the one that's the first point of contact and breaks the bad news. So it is very, very, very difficult at the moment. And, there are probably 10 really good reasons at the moment why it's extremely busy. And we're quoting the numbers we're quoting. Come April next year, probably only 2 of those reasons. So 8 will have gone potentially. So again, from a business point of view, you've gone from doing nothing for April, May, a nice pipeline building in June, but of course the actual volume of work starts maybe only July, August, September. So we're only talking 2.5 months now to recruit additional staff, and to scale up to deal with that caseload isn't as easy as one would assume. To bring in staff, people have to give notice, etc. So that takes time. To train people up into different areas takes time. So as a business, to react to something that's moved so quickly is very difficult. It's not like the previous recession whereby there would be 6 to months to a year, whereby the market moved, whether it was up or down. This has literally been like a light switch on or off, and law firms are having to react to that with the constant threat that even today the government, could announce all of a sudden there's a further lockdown. So, are we?
And also, what I found there was to be fair, they were a fairly notorious firm in my locality. Again, that I'll spare their blushes, but they were, you know, got really well known over the years for sort of expanding massively and then contracting when there was a downturn and just dumping all their staff. So again, there is that really, really difficult tension, isn't there? It's all very well saying, well, let's scale up, but if you're taking somebody else out of a job to come and work for you, and then suddenly there's a downturn next April, May time that everybody's suggesting there will be, well, then you're suddenly left massively overstaffed, and you've potentially got to let, you know, a whole bunch of people go. So there's also that, you know, incredibly serious responsibility, all tied up in this initial premise of ours about managing clients' expectation. Well, Stu, that's, unless there's any other, you know, major bombshell you want to add, because I think we could really, you know, this is a topic that can run and run.
I think, just to finalise, I think from, you know, if you're a client listening to this, and, you know, you want things to progress as smoothly as possible and as quickly as possible, the tips I would give any client dealing with any law firm is, you know, to look after the things that you've also got to do. So make sure that, you know, you've got your mortgage offer. There's no point chasing things like exchange and completion until you've actually got a mortgage offer. It's not going to happen. You know, make sure that if you've been asked to produce ID, bank statements, make sure you've actually done that, because nothing's going to happen until you have. So the last sort of thought would be, if you're a client watching this, just make sure that your own house is in order. You've done all you can to facilitate, you know, a quick and speedy conveyance, so that the lawyer can do their part. And if you haven't heard from them for a day or so, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that nothing's happening.
Well, thanks for that, Stu. I think that sums it up brilliantly. So on that note, we'll say bye-bye and see you again in other Conveyancing Matters really soon. Take care.
All right. Take care, Lorraine. Bye-bye.